As Benjamin Franklin once said, if you fail to prepare, you are preparing to fail. Your freshman year is when you need to begin putting together a game plan of what the next 4 years will look like. It does not have to be set in stone, as things will certainly shift. However, it is imperative to have a big picture idea of what happens during each quarter. Not only which classes you'll be taking, but also how you'll be prioritizing your time outside of the classroom. Pre-med academic advisors are a resource that are often misunderstood. Pre-meds usually go to these pre-med advisors expecting them to have a good idea of how to get into medical school and how to strengthen an application. The truth is, pre-med advisors have no formal training and no formal requirements to advise students on how to be effective pre-meds. I attended an event back in February of 2020 where I spent time with 15 pre-med advisors over the course of a week. I was shocked by the type of advice they give their students. It was not pretty. That being said, they are invaluable in very specific ways. Pre-med advisors understand the nuances of your particular school more than most, since they're helping dozens of students at your university get into medical school. They may know which classes are impacted and harder to get into, or which professors are preferred or should be avoided. They can tell you certain idiosyncrasies about your major or your university that you need to be aware of. If you've planned out all your courses and you want to verify that you're going to meet all the prereqs and that you're going to graduate on time, they are great to double check your schedule. For these purposes, certainly meet with your pre-med or academic advisor. However, beyond that, pre-med advisors are unfortunately woefully unprepared to provide you any meaningful advice on how to be a competitive medical school applicant. They learn on the job without having gone through the pre-med process themselves or ever applied to medical school or ever served on a medical school admissions committee. There is no degree they need to attain. A bachelor's in art or history or whatever else is fine. They have no idea what the prerequisite courses are like because they never actually took them. They don't understand medical school since they never went. And they are clueless when it comes to residency matching and the nuances there, including how to decide between USMD, USDO, and Caribbean. That single decision can massively change your life and restrict you from pursuing the type of doctor that you want to be, so do not take it lightly. From my time spent with them, their advice is unfortunately even more damaging than I expected. Rather than spending the next several minutes going over the crazy things that pre-med advisors have told me, let's just say this. You'll be far better prepared to make important decisions in your pre-med path by following the advice in this course over the advice you receive from your pre-med or academic advisors. In terms of actual medical school application advice, I put them around the same level as going to SDN or Reddit, except they're probably less qualified to offer advice than many of the users on these forums. Again, use them as a resource when planning out your courses and getting specific recommendations of professors and nuances of your university, but beyond that, stick to the information from actual experts. More specifically, experts with admissions committee experience and physicians who have not only successfully gone through the process themselves, but also have a track record of successfully getting pre-meds into medical school and through medical school to become future kick-ass doctors. After all, your goal isn't just to get into a medical school, which is just one step, but also become a highly effective future physician. And be mindful that just because someone is a doctor or a current medical student, that does not make them an expert whose advice you should necessarily listen to. The key in building an effective plan is to always think 2 steps ahead. You should not just be looking at what you need to get done in the upcoming weeks, but you should also be thinking big picture, planning the various scenarios that can play out in the coming quarters and semesters. Take a look at our 2 templates as a great place to start when building your plan. Let's start with your course selection. For almost all students, we recommend you begin hitting your GEs, or general education requirements, and medical school prerequisites in the first 2 years. This is pretty standard. GEs are generally used as filler courses during quarters or semesters when you have more challenging workloads, as GEs are generally easier compared to your science courses. Do not fall into the trap of being overly ambitious during your first quarter. This is going to be a period of adjustment, so take a standard course load, not a heavy course load. At my alma mater, which was on the quarter system, this translated to 3 courses totaling approximately 12 to 14 units. At a school on a semester system, this usually is a little bit higher, around 15 to 16 units. The exact numbers are going to vary based on your program, and you should consult your college advisors for this part. Don't worry about starting off slow and not getting through everything you need to do on time. You'll have plenty of time to take additional units and courses in the subsequent quarters or semesters, and sometimes even during the summer. It's more important not to bite off more than you can chew when you first start college. In terms of which courses to take when, I generally recommend you do 2 science classes and 1 non-science class minimum per quarter or semester. Doing all science classes sometimes is necessary, and I've done it too, but you should generally avoid this because it's going to be more challenging. We want you to achieve as close to a 4.0 GPA as possible, and that's difficult enough as is. Do not make it harder on yourself. Similarly, you should not stack up on non-science classes that you could otherwise spread out and balance out future quarters or semesters. You want to aim to strike a balance between hitting all of your necessary prereqs on one hand, but maintaining a strong GPA on the other. If you take too light of a course load during the first 2 years, you won't get through nearly enough prerequisites to take your MCAT. If you are too aggressive with your course load, you'll get through your prereqs, but probably not with straight A's or with a balanced social and extracurricular component. When you plan on applying to medical school will help us determine when you should take the MCAT, which will help us plan your coursework. You don't have to make a hard final decision at this point whether you want to apply to medical school straight through or after a year or more off. However, having an inclination toward one side or the other will help us plan accordingly. Remember, this can always be changed and adapted in the future. If you want to go straight through to medical school, you'll need to apply during the end of your junior year. This means the latest you should take your MCAT is also the end of junior year. Many students take their MCAT at some point during junior year, but understand that studying for and taking the MCAT while you have other coursework will be a compromise and it may limit your overall performance. I generally advise students to take the MCAT right before they start junior year, during the summer, where they can dedicate more time to studying. If you want to take 1 year off, you have more flexibility. You can apply at the end of your senior year, meaning you can take the MCAT at any time up to that point. At the same time, you don't want to wait too long between taking your prereqs and taking the MCAT, as you'll definitely forget some important information. For those students, I generally advise taking the MCAT during the summer between your junior and senior year. Again, taking the MCAT during the regular school year is certainly an option, but having dedicated time is generally preferred. After the first 2 years, you should have most of your prerequisites done, but there may be a few left. Students often ask if they can still take the MCAT. That's going to depend. First, let me say that I had not taken biochemistry until after the MCAT, but I still scored a 99.9th percentile score. Does that mean everyone should skip biochemistry or other prerequisite courses? Not necessarily. Here is how you can decide. If you are a stronger student and you find yourself being able to master the material pretty quickly, then you may be fine learning content from review books or other MCAT study tools. However, if you are a weaker student and you find yourself struggling to master the material or needing to put in extra effort with certain subject areas, like organic chemistry, which is a common one, then I suggest you take your prerequisites first. This may mean that you need to take the MCAT during your junior year or even push it to the summer between junior and senior year. At this point, you may be thinking, why can't I just apply at the end of my junior year and take the MCAT during that summer? The reason you should not do this is because of the rolling nature of medical school admissions. You should prioritize getting your application in as soon as possible with it fully complete. Whenever possible, submit your app on the first day, or at least in the first 1 to 2 weeks, which also won't hurt you. It takes time for your application to be verified and for it to be sent out to medical schools. This generally happens by around July 1st. If you wait to submit your application, it will take far longer to have your application verified and sent out to medical schools. Even if you submit your application and are verified as quickly as possible, medical schools will receive your application, but they won't process it until they receive your MCAT score. From the point of taking your MCAT, it generally takes a month to receive a score. If you take your MCAT in July or August, schools won't be able to process your application until August or September earliest, which will certainly be detrimental to your overall chances of getting into medical school. With rolling admissions, medical schools fill up classes on a first-come, first-served basis. That means if you are interviewing during an earlier date, there are more open seats available. But if you're interviewing at a later date, many of the seats will already be filled, such that the odds are not stacked in your favor. In most cases, I advise a student to apply the subsequent year rather than applying late during that cycle. It is important to note, however, that this sometimes varies based on the individual circumstances. We'll be talking more about extracurriculars and other components in your plan shortly. Understand that your plan will change, and this is completely fine and actually encouraged. You will not have everything figured out day one of college. And based on new events, new information, and new interests, it's only natural for the plan to adjust with time. The important thing is to have a plan, reflect on it, and be deliberate about it, rather than blindly going at the pre-med process piecemeal. In summary, use your pre-med advisor with help navigating the specific nuances of your college's enrollment process and course selection, but don't rely too heavily on them beyond that. While they have the best intentions, they don't necessarily have the experience or expertise, and they often mislead pre-meds. Decide on when you want to apply to medical school and backtrack from there. Going straight through requires a different approach compared to taking a year off. From there, plan your MCAT and your medical school prerequisite courses. Your plan is a great starting point, but don't expect it to be finalized. Visit your plan often and make changes as necessary.